today is another special one for me, Danny, the host of Treatment Room Secrets, because it's episode 20. Episode 10, I celebrated by getting on the podcast on my own. So I spoke to myself, or I spoke to the audience with myself only in the room for an hour plus about a bunch of things we've learned in the first 9 episodes. So now we're at 20. Maybe I'll throw in a couple things that came up in the first 19. But a new one today. We are here with Mr. Bob McAtee. Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure to be here. Yeah.
All the way from Colorado Springs, Colorado.
That's right.
We're back here in Cary, North Carolina, the second largest town in America, maybe in the world. And for the first time, we're drinking alcohol, booze, on the podcast. So for the listeners who are not watching the video, we do have beer here. I thought, and we'll cheers for episode 20. Congratulations to us. Congratulations for our listeners who have stuck with us until now, and hopefully many more to go. And we're also celebrating a couple of days of good work, talking a lot about sports massage, talking a lot about different modalities that are involved in massage, and just another way of helping people relieve themselves from some pain, and trying to equip therapists with the tools to help their clients, help their patients. I will take a sip of my beer. The reason I think that it's worth mentioning the beer is because, we categorize this podcast as a health and fitness and therapy podcast. So having beer might look weird to people, so I'm just prefacing it. We did have Coca-Cola on one episode, I think, as well, which I did not mention, and now I think I should have. But just so I think the listeners, I think it's important to know that I am, Neil Asher, we are NAT Global Campus. We're somewhat normal. We do drink in celebratory occasions. So, Bob, thank you very much for being here. Today we'll talk a lot about sports massage, about you. And when we met up this morning, I told you straight away that my calves have basically locked up on me, and it hasn't really relieved itself since. And it's because I went on a run with new shoes, barefoot shoes that I have spoken about on the podcast before. I have been trying to teach myself to run with barefoot shoes slowly, and it's been a 7-month journey so far. Today I ran for 25 minutes with my barefoot shoes, Vivo barefoot shoes, and it's the most I ran with them. And towards the end of my run, I could feel my calves not cramping, but signaling to me that I should stop, because I think they were overstrained. I don't know if you can correct me if I'm using the wrong term, but they felt overstrained, overfatigued, unable to carry all my weight for so long, and they needed a break. And as soon as I finished, I felt them seize up, and they have not released. And if someone saw me walking outside when I walked earlier to get us some coffees, they would think that something was wrong with me. So hopefully in the next couple of days it clears up, and I can take maybe a step back and reintegrate myself into this barefoot running in a more conservative way, and I will. So if I came to you as a client, what would you tell me?
Well,
or how could you
excuse me?
Yeah,
how could I help you?
Well, how could you help me, because my calves are in pain?
Well, if only we would have had time during the filming today to throw you on the table and do some of the sports massage work that we were demonstrating.
I know I'm
helped
not
you a lot.
I'm not as appealing as the model that came in.
But, as a sports massage therapist, we work with all types of people, body types, etc. And you're certainly an athlete. I guess the first thing that I would say is I believe you're correct. You went from running 5 to 10 minutes in these barefoot shoes to all of a sudden doing 25 minutes, because it felt good for the first 20 couple of minutes, right? Yep. 22 minutes. And then all of a sudden you were like, oh, that's maybe too much. And I do think you've probably overloaded your calf muscles, because when you're trying to move from being a heel strike runner to a midfoot runner, which is what the Barefoot shoes promote, your muscles have to adapt to that. And in the midfoot strike, you're avoiding being on the heel, so you're much more up, using your calves much more to keep you up in like plantar flexion as you roll over that foot during the running stride. So,
have you come across individuals? I mean, I'm thinking because Boulder, Colorado Springs. I hear a lot of people are open-minded around there. So have you come across individuals who are running with barefoot shoes, who are facing new injuries because of their attempt to run is it the midfoot strike, you said?
The midfoot strike, yes. Or the forefoot strike, sometimes called. Running more on the balls of your feet than landing on your heel first. And the theory behind barefoot shoes and forefoot running is that if you're a heel striker, which is kind of the classic running style, where you land on the edge of your heel and then roll through your foot, biomechanically, that does appear that every time you strike with the heel, you're getting a little bit of braking action. So it's slowing you down and you're putting a lot of shock up through the lower extremity. Whereas with forefoot running, you're not having that brake, first of all. And number two, you're not on your feet for very long. So running is a lot like flying anyway. Most of the running stride, both feet are off the ground.
Yeah.
So that brief contact with the ground in the forefoot is less stressful overall. Except it puts a lot more stress on the calf muscles because you're in that plantar flexion position with a lot of weight on your body.
And which, again, for 99% of my life, I've been training to heel strike.
To heel strike.
And not putting so much pressure on my calves.
Right. They used to say in running that every time you've had a foot strike, you were absorbing 2.5 times your body weight. I don't know if that science holds, if that theory holds for forefoot running, but certainly one foot, the forefoot, is supporting all of your weight, if not 2.5 times your body weight. And because you're in that calf shortened position most of the time, when you strike, the calf just works a lot harder. So I would say you overloaded your calf today because you ran 25 minutes instead of 10. If we go back to the old sort of exercise theory that you should only increase your training 10% a week, right? If we look at your mileage, right, 5 to 10 minutes of running in barefoot shoes, a 10% increase would have been, do the math, a minute or two at a time, right? So
when you put it that way now, it makes sense.
Yeah. So going forward, there's two things to think about. You've been transitioning for 7 months to be a barefoot runner. And as you said earlier, a running coach told you that you should think about running more slowly to build resilience in your muscles.
Episode 18.
Pardon me?
Episode 18.
Oh, episode 18. I haven't listened to that one yet. And who was the coach?
It was Stephanie Natchak.
Oh, Stephanie Natchak. Yes, yeah. I think I follow her on LinkedIn.
That's awesome.
At any rate, you increase your mileage too much at once, number one. I guess the larger question for me would be, is barefoot running appropriate for you?
You're challenging me. I think I'm challenging myself to figure out if it's appropriate for me or not. I do know that running 15 minutes with them is appropriate in terms of my body's reaction to it. 25 minutes, obviously not.
Not, okay.
Today.
Not today, right.
What I'm hoping is however many months it takes to make the appropriate transition, and I will probably have to make it a bit more conservative, especially after the feedback I received today from my calves and from you, is to be able to heel strike when I want to heel strike and forefoot strike when I want to forefoot strike.
Did Stephanie have any comments about sort of the average time it takes for a runner to transition from heel to forefoot?
Not really, but her feedback was that a lot of the time people get injured when trying to make the transition.
Yes, they do.
So I'm trying to challenge myself to be able to do it injury-free. So, and I will, and I'll keep the podcast updated. But in terms of like sports massage, for example, so obviously now intuitively, I feel like getting a massage on my calves would be I couldn't think of anything better. In your experience, would that be the best thing for me to do? Not the best, doesn't have to be the best, but would that be a net positive thing for me to do right now?
I would say absolutely. Yes.
Why?
Because the muscles have been overloaded. They're probably still a little spasmy. If we were to go in and start to do massage work on them, we'd probably find what would feel like knots in your muscles or super tight fibers in your gastrocnemius and your soleus. Maybe a little soreness on your Achilles tendon, because tendons get injured when the stresses on the tendon tissue is more than they can tolerate, okay? Now, the good thing is you've only done this once, so you're not developing a long-term injury, right? This is a temporary setback, if you will.
Yeah.
So massage therapy would be designed to help relieve the tension and the spasmy feeling in the tissues, bring more oxygenated blood into the muscles, help remove any metabolic waste that might have accumulated, because we think there's a lot of stuff in massage that we have a hypothesis for. We have an idea about how it works, but research continues to maybe be equivocal about whether what we say is happening is really happening. At any rate, your nervous system is telling you that your calf muscles hurt. Your brain is getting enough signals from your calf that are noxious, right? Your calf is reporting up through the spinal cord to the brain like there's a lot of stuff going on here. And the brain, if we're thinking about the wider aspects of research in pain science, the brain gets to decide whether what you're feeling is pain or something that's not pain. So because your brain is reporting pain to you, there's going to be other compensations that you've been making. I didn't see you walk to get coffee, but I'm guessing you're a little stiff in the legs and feet. And so that's the way that your nervous system has gone, okay, we have an issue here. We need to modify the way things work to reduce pain, prevent further injury, whatever else is going on as far as how you're adapting to the pain you're feeling in your calves. So if we come back to doing sports massage for you, again, we have these sports massage interventions that we used to explain as being very mechanical. We're releasing stuff in the tissues. We're doing this and that in the tissues. And what we mostly talk about now is how the massage work affects the reporting of all those mechanoreceptors in the calves to the brain to help reduce the sense of pain and introduce sensations that are more pleasurable, feel more relaxed. And then the nervous system reduces its threat level in the calves and allows the calves to relax and return to a more normal state. I mean, that's kind of a long-winded explanation for what probably is going on.
No,
it's way more complicated than we normally talk about with clients. It's like, we're doing sports massage because it's going to help improve the tone and tension of your calf muscles.
And it'll feel good.
And it'll feel good, by the way. Mostly. It shouldn't hurt. It might be uncomfortable, but shouldn't be painful.
But you described there an evolution of what, sports massage was thought as and what it is now. Can you explain that again, what you mentioned? Because you said it was more mechanical and now it's focusing more on the pain receptors.
Right. And not just sports massage, but massage of any kind, any body work, physiotherapy modalities that manipulate muscle tissue. The thinking now is that, well, in the old explanation was that massage work would sort of by the work itself on the tissue, help it to relax, mechanically kind of manipulate the tissue so that it would relax and respond, and pain would be reduced because the muscle was more supple. We reduced the excessive tone, we reduced the tension in the tissue, which took some of the pressure off the tendon. Therefore, the whole complex was in a more, what we say, sort of normalized state. What happens with exercise is oftentimes, as a result of the load on the tissues, they tend to, especially when they're in the fatigue state, and I'm not sure this science is still correct, but it used to be that we thought that because the muscle had been contracted and relaxed over and over, it tended to stay in a more contracted state at the end of exercise because it just was out of juice, so to speak, to allow it to completely relax again. So massage and stretching were thought to help return the muscle to its normal resting length with its normal tone. So not spasmy, not feeling like it was going to go into spasm or cramp. So now, given the advances in research and pain science, that explanation may or may not be completely accurate. So we know in the tissues there are all kinds of receptors, mechanoreceptors, and we're not calling them pain receptors. We call them tissues that record pressure, temperature, speed of change of the muscle tissue, of the muscle fibers. That would be like muscle spindles. Pressure, mechanoreceptors that record pressure.
So instead of defining everything as pain, trying to break it down to more quantifiable variables.
Right. And so some of these receptors will they all report through the nervous system to the brain, which then takes in also the environment, your background, your social history, your psychology. Have you had injuries? Have you had conditions like this before that the brain can compare to? The brain in less than milliseconds makes a decision about what to report to the nervous system about what's going on there. So what we're saying is that all the work that we do with manual therapy or sports massage or other kinds of hands-on work, that's all still good. Our explanation of why it works is what's changing. And we're in a transition in my profession where a lot of what we used to think we knew now seems to be all up in the air. Now we're in kind of a gray area. Like, should I keep doing what I'm doing? And there are a lot of elements in the hands-on therapy world that are coming up with other theories and different ideas about whether deep pressure is necessary to affect the nervous system for input and output of signals, whether it's pain or not pain. Some folks are saying you can just work on the skin by itself and that's enough. Personally, for me, that drives me crazy. I like massage work. I don't like painful massage, but I like deep massage, right? And
in terms of what
I like to receive.
Okay.
In terms of what I like to receive. And of course, I'm trying to provide the kind of work that I like to get. This is I know this feels good to me. This has worked for me in the past. So based on my education and experience, I'm trying to put together the same kind of treatment sessions for my clients. So, yeah.
In your opinion, is there any merit to maybe researchers or studies that come out that maybe, try to debunk any legitimacy that's involved in receiving a massage in terms of maintenance or muscle recovery?
As we were talking about earlier today, there's research on either side of that question. There's plenty of research that indicates that massage is not really effective for injury prevention or performance enhancement, recovery from auto accidents, people with whiplash injuries or other soft tissue injuries. There is also research that shows that certain types of massage do have a positive effect on the outcomes in some of those categories. The problem with research, in my opinion, is because massage therapy, manual therapy, other hands-on practices are so personal, it's hard to design a double-blind study that can actually give you good results, especially because a lot of the results are subjective reports from the clients or in the study from the study participants, right? So they have a study where they have, let's say, 20 college students they've recruited because that's where a lot of the research is done, right? 10 of them are in a control group, which does something that's not massage. 10 of them are in a group where they apply some kind of massage treatment. It's typically like to a body part, not always applied by a professional massage therapist. And then they try to, they try to control for as many variables as they can. But if you're a college student receiving a 20-minute massage once a week on your calves from the same person, even if they're not a trained massage therapist, from the same person, you develop a relationship with that person as well. It's not just, you're not an inert object being manipulated by an outside force. And the massage may be a little different each time, even though the protocol says the therapist is going to do 3 minutes of this and 2 minutes of this and 5 minutes of that, or however it's set up. The tissue feels different every time it's worked on, and so that changes the intensity, the way it feels, whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable. And so then then you have those 10 people in that group, all with really 10 different experiences. Yeah. And each experience of each of those people is different each time. Then you have a control group who does, maybe they stretch, maybe they meditate, maybe they have muscle stim, whatever the control element is. And even though maybe they're doing something that's more mechanical, every time those control people come in, they're different than they were before. The muscle tissue is different based on whatever they've been doing in the intervening time. So I think it makes it really hard to have a double-blind study that you can replicate, because there's so much that you can't control for in a research situation.
Yeah.
So
you've been doing this for 40 odd years.
42 plus. Let's see. I actually did my first massage training in 1976, but I don't count that because it was just for fun. And I tried to do a little bit of massage here and there, but nothing. I never really pursued it.
So
then in 1981 that's when I target as my start date, because I went back to massage school to do some more training.
So can I ask you, who was Bob McAtee pre-massage?
Sure. I was I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. I graduated high school from a Catholic seminary. So I spent the last 2 years of high school in a Catholic seminary in Cincinnati. Realized that being a priest wasn't for me. Moved back home to Youngstown and enrolled in Youngstown State University. My initial degree, I was planning to major in languages. Awesome. I was planning to major in languages, and think with the idea that, I'll learn how to speak French and I can become a translator and then I can travel, internationally.
Was it traveling then? Like
the traveling was, I already traveling was in my idea. Yeah.
And the seminary, was it personal ambition in the beginning or pressure from the outside?
Well, I grew up in a Catholic family, and there's a certain amount of, I wouldn't say pressure, but a lot of Catholic families have expectations, and I wasn't the oldest son. My sister had already entered the convent. I think she entered the convent before I did. She didn't stay either, but so in my town, they had this program where they recruited juniors and seniors in high school boys and we actually got recruited when we were freshmen in high school. I think they were trying to get us before puberty really kicked in, before the hormones really kicked in. It's like, oh, this is a good thing for you, and your parents will really be proud of you. And, I'm from an Irish Catholic family, so, to be honest, my brother and I had gotten into some trouble too. But there was that incentive to prove that I was a good boy,
Yeah.
Anyway.
What trouble, may I ask?
A little vandalism here and there, yeah. So anyway, I do think my memories are starting to be a little vague, but my brother and I and my dad we needed to go to our local police station for a conversation. Anyway, that was another little bit of outside pressure. Yeah. So, and I have to say I was interested, and the priest who led our little group in my parish, I liked the guy. He was a fairly new priest. He was young. He was athletic. He was very positive. And in fact,
athletic.
He was a runner. He was a
runner.
runner.
It's funny.
And, I tried to...
It's not the word I expected to come out as a characterization.
For a priest, yeah. He was new out of the seminary at that time. I didn't realize all this until later.
Yeah.
And, I would go run with him a little bit. I was never really good at running. I didn't really like it that much, but it was fun to be outside and kind of hang out with him a little bit, and talk about the priesthood and what it was like for him. And anyway, and just as an aside, I recently reconnected with him because he's now, let's see, I'm almost 75. He's 80-something, still lives in Ohio. He and I have sort of been in touch over the years because my mother and he developed a nice relationship. Anyway, a couple of years ago, he emailed me and said, "Hey, Bob, this is Father McCarnes. I hope you remember me from St. Charles. I have this injury. I was hoping you could help me with this."
That's amazing. And what, you haven't spoken to him for 40 years?
Well, no, but he's had copies of my stretching book. My mother gifted him a copy of one of my early editions, and I think I sent him. He's had a couple of editions. Anyway, so we've been in touch a little bit, but mostly through email.
Yeah.
So I was like, "Yeah, Father, I'll be happy to help you with that." I get to call him Jim now instead of. And so I was able to sort of chat with him and find out what's going on with him. And then, as I do with a lot of people who contact me from all over the world, really, "Hey, I have this injury. I need some help with it. Can you help me, or can you refer me to somebody?" So I did a little research, and I found not a massage therapist, but a physio in his town that had really good reviews. And so I said, "Well, Jim, I can't come and do anything, and you're not going to come from Ohio to Colorado for me to treat you. So here's the next best thing we can do. Go see this guy and see what you think." And so he did, and he's written me back saying he's doing really well now, So
it's awesome.
So,
wow.
It's like full circle.
Yeah.
50, 60 something years later, right?
By the way, have you been back to Youngstown, Ohio at all since?
Oh, yeah, I go. I'm one of 10.
Oh, wow.
There's still 9 of us left. My oldest brother passed away a few years ago. So I still have siblings who live there, and a few friends. I don't stay in touch with too many people anymore from high school. But I moved to. So to get back, what?
Yeah.
How did I end up in?
So you had the seminary.
Oh, jeez. I left the seminary, moved back to Youngstown, moved back in with my parents, started going to school at Youngstown State University, majoring in French, right? Thinking I'd be a translator. At some point in the 3 years I was there, I switched my major to psychology. And during that time, a couple of friends of mine decided to take the summer off and go to California. They were going to Long Beach, California, which is in the South. One of my friends' uncle and aunt lived there, so they had a connection. And in that summer, which was then, 1969, I went out there for about 10 days and just hung out with them. And I was like, well, this is really different than Youngstown, Ohio. I mean, I knew it was going to be because, it was the 60s and it was Southern California. I mean, everybody was moving there, right? It was after the Haight-Ashbury, all the hippie stuff.
All the creative people.
All the creative people were out there. And there was some beach and
nice weather. 52 weeks a year.
Man, I don't want to go back to Ohio winters. So I had my vacation. I went back home, attended my third year at Youngstown State, already making plans to move to California the next summer. So I had a part-time job while I was going to school, so I was able to save a little money. And the next summer, I went out to California. One of my friend with the aunt and uncle had stayed. All of his buddies had already sort of come back. They had just gone out there for the fun of it, they weren't planning to move there. So I was able to sort of crash with him for a while, met his aunt and uncle. I had met him before. They were really nice people. We went over there for dinner a couple times a week, His uncle helped me get a job. They co-signed a car loan for me. I mean, it was really great in those days. And so that's how I ended up in California. And then in 1970...
But with no, do you have, back then, once you left the idea of being a translator, did you have a career in mind?
Psychology. Clinical psychology. Because I had started that psychology training at Youngstown State.
Yeah.
When I moved to California, of course, I had no money. I think I left Youngstown with $100 in my pocket and a car to sell, which my sister sold for me and sent me the $500 we got from 1964 Ford Galaxy. Anyway, this is kind of fun to reminisce all this.
Yeah, why not? Why
not? In those days, if you were a California resident, university was free. Since I had no money, I just waited for a year to get my residency so that I could go back to school. So after a year, my friend's uncle Ziggy had gotten me a job with a publishing company. Not a publishing company, distribution company for magazines and paperbacks. So I was working that job, saving some money. Once I got my residency, I enrolled in Cal State Long Beach and continued my education toward my BA in psychology. So that was those next couple of years. From 71, it took me until 74 to graduate because I was working, going part-time. And in those years, by the time I got my degree in psychology, I was like, I don't want to be a clinical psychologist. Because I had some friends who were, and you needed at least a master's degree to get licensed or certified or whatever.
Yeah, it's the next natural progression.
Yeah. And I had a couple friends that were ahead of me in school, and they were in their master's program. They were the unhappiest people I knew. And I was like, yeah, I could see why this could get really tough, listening to people all day. And I have enough problems of my own. And you know what they say, of course, people who study psychology are trying to sort out their own crap, from childhood, etc. Anyway, I was a juvenile delinquent, then I dropped out of the seminary, I had... Anyway.
Focus on yourself.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So the good thing is, and long story bring us around to body work.
Yeah.
The good thing is, in my last year of college at Cal State Long Beach, I started hearing about these body-oriented therapies that were coming out of, the sort of hippie New Age movement. You've heard of Esalen, the Esalen retreat up in Northern California?
I haven't.
It's I've never been there, but I've wanted to go. It was famous for the setting, which is on a cliffside looking over the Pacific, and they hold all kinds of human potential movement workshops, a lot of massage. There's a famous style of massage called Esalen massage. A lot of there were a lot of developments in what I would call sort of body work versus massage, and body work focused on interacting with psychological issues as well. So things like bioenergetic therapy, Gestalt therapy. Fritz Perls is a famous guy who came up with Gestalt therapy. Anyway, there was all that stuff going on in the world of psychology that was kind of oriented toward body therapy as a practice for getting at emotional content. And so I knew about this stuff, and I started hearing about a fellow by the name of Wilhelm Reich, and he developed a process called Reichian therapy, Reichian. He was a contemporary of Freud, and Reich developed this theoretical construct that we learned very early in our lifetime to block life energy by creating muscular armor in the body. And so he had a whole theoretical construct that as humans, we learn to block so-called negative emotions like anger, fear, jealousy, sadness by contracting muscles in our body to block the flow of the energy from those emotions. And so his work was based on kind of reducing or eliminating, breaking through that body armor. So he was doing body work, right? Let's see if I remember this. If you block sadness as your main emotion that you block, sadness covers anger. And sadness, we can look at a person's posture and see that if their chest is all collapsed and their shoulders are rounded, they're blocking sadness. But under the sadness, there's anger that they need to release. So his theory was that there's this layer of energy blockage trying to hold down the volcano down below, if you will. So I got interested in kind of body therapy because I was like, that's good because it bypasses the intellectual process. So in clinical psychology, if I'm a counseling therapist, you come to me and we chat for an hour, right? Or 50 minutes. What's going on? How you feeling? But it's all sort of intellectual. If you don't really connect physically with it, it's pretty easy to avoid really dealing with anything.
Yeah, because you do, as a therapist, you're relying on the words the person sitting in front of you chooses to use.
Right. And, most therapists will tell you in a 50-minute session, nothing happens until minute 45. And then all of a sudden, something happens and then the session's over, right? Because the client is, I think all of us are reluctant to admit that we have all this stuff going on. Even though I'm voluntarily going to therapy, I'm paying you, I really don't want you to know very much about me. I think. I mean, that's the sense that I was getting when I was trying to do the talk therapy kind of thing. So I started reading about Reich, and I got interested in those kinds of things, Reichian therapy. Now, Reich was famous in the 50s. He got into a lot of trouble with the U.S. government. I don't need to go into the whole story, but they burned all of his books, and I couldn't find really anything about him until after I graduated from Cal State Long Beach. I did what everybody was doing in those days, going to Europe for a little while, And I came across a book about him in a used bookstore in London. Just by chance.
So back then, what we said in the 70s,
Yes.
in the US, you just physically couldn't find anything?
I couldn't find it.
And you were searching for? You just couldn't find?
Well, and of course there was no internet then.
Yeah.
I looked around, I asked around, I was trying to find any books of his. I couldn't, and as I did more research, and to be honest, I don't know how I found this out, but I found out something about Reich, that he had gotten into trouble with the U.S. government for the way he was operating. Somehow his books got banned, and then some government agency burned the books that were in circulation. So no, it's been years since I've looked at this. I don't know if any of that was really true, but at any rate.
So quick question
Yes,
from the producer.
from the
over at
producer.
Peanut Gallery.
Yeah.
Reiki sounds a lot like Reiki, and they sound very similar. Is there any connection to like the energy healing of Reiki in this guy's research?
There is not. Wilhelm Reich, R-E-I-C-H, was a psychotherapist whose work was all about breaking down the body armor that we create by holding on to patterns of muscular tension. Reiki, R-E-I-K-I, is a Japanese energy healing technique that may include laying on of hands, but isn't really manipulative in any way. Reiki can also be done hands-off and remotely. My wife is a Reiki master. It's pretty clear that she can send healing energy to somebody else somewhere else, not even in the room, not even in the same city, Yeah.
So no connection to Reiki?
No connection. No, Reich and Reiki.
Okay, because that's what I was...
Totally separate. Yeah,
Okay.
Two different things. Thanks for asking that, Joe. Yeah.
That's good.
So Reich was popular in the 50s. His work sort of disappeared for a while, and then it was probably underground, I'm guessing. But then it started to reemerge during the human potential movement in the late 60s, early 70s. And now it was called Neo-Reichian work. And so some of the other body therapies, I would say, sort of came out of that same tradition where like, we want to work on the physical body to get at the emotional energy that's being suppressed, so.
Knowing what you know now,
No.
knowing what you know now,
Yeah.
40 years later, 40 plus years later,
Yeah.
what do you think of that based on your experiences working with people, on people for so long?
I think,
And you said something, I think, key earlier, that seeing a therapist, massage therapist or sports therapist, you are developing a relationship with that person, whether you like it or not.
absolutely. Yeah.
Which I think creates some emotional connection, psychological connection with that individual,
Mm-hmm.
and some energy connection there in the room.
Yes.
Whether you admit it or like it,
Right.
something is happening in that room.
Right. And you can still,
I want to
yeah,
hear that answer for
Okay.
that question.
Yeah.
I really have to pee. Do you have to pee?
not yet, but go ahead. Let's take a break.
So I asked you just about your, you've been doing this for decades now,
Yeah.
40 plus years.
Yeah.
So what do you think now about, those movements that were going on then, what allegedly the US government were trying to suppress, based on your experience with your clients, with these, untangible relationships that are developing and occurring on a daily basis for you?
Okay, so let me back up and clarify. The government came after Dr. Reich because he was building...
Is it right with a T?
Reich, R-E-I-C-H,
Okay.
Reich,
Yep.
Dr. Reich, Wilhelm Reich. In addition to his sort of body-oriented psychotherapy, because he was interested in life energy, the energy that flows through us, in Asian terms that would be qi, like in martial arts, qi or ki, he called it orgone, O-R-G-O-N-E. And he believed you could collect it and amplify it by building a structure that a person could sit in to sort of recharge, if you will. And these were structures that were, they had different layers of different materials, and then he was promoting and selling those. So I believe the government came after him for fraud, for medical fraud, and that's what got him into trouble initially. And then from what I read, he was quite an angry man, very not willing to cooperate with the government. He knew better than they did, so his ego and his suppressed anger got him in super trouble because he hadn't done enough body therapy with someone else. And so I'm making light of it, but that's why he got in trouble, not because of the body work aspect of his work.
Yeah.
So body therapy as a modality is still alive and well in the U.S. and probably internationally. I do believe it's beneficial and helpful as long as both parties, the client and the therapist, are open to doing it and the therapist has enough training. So when I did my massage training, I was looking for more of a bodywork school that was focused on some emotional work as well. Because after reading the book about Reich, actually in the bibliography, there were some contact for some of his students or, proteges who were still doing something. And there just happened to be a guy by the name of Charles Kelly who had an institute, which was in Santa Monica at the time, called the Radix Institute, R-A-D-I-X. And they were doing trainings for people to do neo-Reichian work with clients. So I came back from Europe. I was living in California anyway, came back to Long Beach. So I went up to the Radix Institute in Santa Monica as a client to experience this work, which I thought was very powerful. The emotional aspect, like you say, you live your first 20 years and then you spend the rest of your life trying to figure out what the hell you have to do, right? So I got a lot of benefit from doing Radix work. They didn't call it therapy because you couldn't get licensed in this. They called it education. So Radix education. But basically it was a one-on-one session where the Radix educator was working with you as a client, helping you to start to feel the energy flowing through your body by doing certain massage techniques and breathing techniques to release that stuff. And so I got a lot of benefit out of it myself, and I thought I would go do that training. And then I realized that, it's $10,000 to do this training. This was back in 1974, 75. I didn't have any money in those days. And then I realized, okay, I could probably finagle some way to do this training, but then I'd only have a certificate of completion to be an educator. And it just didn't feel like that was a viable career path for me. But while I was thinking about this process, one of the requirements for being a Radix educator was to be licensed to touch people. And so they required you to go to have a basic massage therapy program, which was what led me to my first massage training in 1976, because I was still looking at maybe doing that. So that's how I got into massage. And when I went back to school in 1981 to the school that I went to, they had kind of a focus on more body work, not just massage. They were interested in some, emotional processing, some psychological issues that come out of doing hands-on work with people. So that's what attracted me to that school and that practice. And when I first came out of massage school, I was focused on doing that kind of more body work, emotional release work, if you will, to help people. I had a degree in psychology, But I realized pretty early into my attempt to do that work that I was not equipped at all to handle some of the emotional material that people were releasing during our sessions. So that's what, so then I started to back away from that because I just didn't feel equipped. It wasn't fair to the client for me to help them get to this material and then not know how to help them process it.
Did it make you realize how much people are going through?
It did.
Like more than you initially thought?
Oh, absolutely. We all have so much stuff that we don't reveal. Maybe we don't even know about it ourselves. Yeah.
I heard you say sometime the last couple of days that massage schools today are not like they used to be from the educational standpoint. I'm not sure exactly in what context you said it, but I'd like to ask you about that. What is different maybe from because now maybe as a teacher, when you step into various institutions around the world, do you notice a difference in terms of how it's taught?
The massage education in the U.S., and I can really only speak for the U.S., and not the whole U.S. I haven't been to that many schools, but in speaking with other educators in my field, sort of griping about certain things. We've gone through a couple of periods of massage education. When I went to school for massage therapy, there were no corporate chains operating massage schools. There were no community colleges operating massage trainings. Most massage schools in the 60s and 70s were started by practitioners who had a passion for passing on their knowledge to the next generation, The school I went to was founded in San Diego by, I think, about a dozen practitioners. There was a Rolfer, there were a couple of martial artists, there were a few massage therapists who were trained in different areas. They started in San Diego and they had a branch in LA, which is where I went. I don't think there were any other massage schools in the U.S. And of course, I don't know this for sure, but I would guess that the majority of massage schools that were operating in the late 60s, early 70s, even mid 70s, were one shop owned by the founders, or run by the founders who came out of that world, right? Some of the schools got bigger. In those days, there was no standardized training. Now in the U.S., we have standardized training and licensure and lots of hoops for schools to jump through. In those days, it was hippie. It was hippie. It was real informal, kind of family-oriented. Most of the people who were going to massage school felt they were drawn to it, not as a business, but as a something they were just drawn to do, right? They wanted to help people. They felt like maybe they had good experiences receiving massage. They wanted to do that, repeat that with other people in their lives or in their community. And, then, excuse me, I got to clear my throat.
Of course. So I was going to ask you, together with the school, because you obviously chose where to study and where to go, why sports for you as a career?
Well, that just speaks to my evolution as a massage therapist. I started out thinking I was going to do body therapy with people because I liked the experience that I had receiving that work, and like many people, sort of feeling like they had a calling, or a vocation to do some work. I really felt drawn to doing some kind of massage work when I realized that I couldn't really do the emotional release kind of bodywork therapy. I stepped back to just do more like regular massage, if you will. And one of the things about doing that emotional release work is, for the most part, I think both people in the room have to have the intention for that to occur. So when I pulled back from doing that kind of work, I saw only occasionally some emotional release. Maybe somebody would start to cry a little bit because something happened during the massage that brought that up for them. And I felt perfectly equipped to handle that with, my background. But for the deeper emotional material that some people were experiencing in those sessions where it was my intention for that to happen, I knew I was just out of my depth. So when I just sort of pulled back to start doing more what I would call regular relaxation massage, that was fine for a while, but I was getting kind of bored, really, doing sort of Swedish massage over and over. And even though I had gone to this school that was focused on body work, I knew a lot of, and I incorporated a lot of techniques beyond just Swedish work. So I first started hearing about sports massage in the early 80s. The Olympics were held in LA in 84. By then I was living in San Diego. And I was seeing these advertisements for sports massage trainings to prepare volunteers to work at the LA Olympics. So, I just got curious. I didn't pursue it at the time. But let's see, in 1985, I decided to just go take a workshop, a seminar in it. And the guy who became my mentor, John Harris, the late John Harris now, was running this 50-hour sports massage training in Encinitas, California. So I was living in San Diego. Encinitas is a beach town up in North County, San Diego. Speaking of living at the beach. So I went to this 50-hour training, and I liked John a lot. He was a great instructor. The people in the class were, you know what, I don't remember who was in the class, but I just remember it felt like a really cohesive group.
Was this before you knew anything about John?
Yeah, I didn't know him.
So this was your first introduction?
My first introduction to him.
Yep.
I didn't know him. I knew he had gone to a school in San Diego, and I knew a little bit about the school, but I didn't know him. I didn't really know anything about sports massage. But it's like, I keep hearing about this, and, it was inexpensive enough that I figured I would just go do it, and see what happened, because I was looking for something else to do anyway. And it was really a life-changing experience because that set me on my path as a sports massage career. I liked the work. I liked the speed and style of the work. I liked the thinking behind the work. I enjoyed working with active people and athletes, even though I'm not one myself. It just all sort of came together for me. So that's how I got turned into the direction of doing sports massage as my sort of focused work. Yeah.
And have no background in sports yourself, besides those runs back in the...
Well, a little bit of intramural basketball when I was in high school. I played a lot of handball, learned how to play handball in the seminary.
I played handball for a year.
Yeah. And I played handball. I loved handball. And even when I moved to California, a couple pals of mine, we used to go play handball every weekend.
It's very underestimated sport in the U.S.
And now, I'm talking about the old style handball with the little hard rubber ball, not Olympic style handball. Which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about how small is the ball you're talking about?
It's this big. It's this big around.
Really? So what do you do with that?
Hard rubber, super hard rubber.
What do you try and score goals with it?
No. Oh. You're talking about the Olympic style handball. Yeah. This handball was in a court like a what's now a racquetball court. They used to all be handball courts.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little hard black rubber ball about this big around, and you wear a glove on each hand. If you're lucky, you have pads on the gloves because the ball is so freaking hard, man. So, but you have a goal wall, you have a line on the wall that you have to hit the ball below for serving. So it has to hit a certain area of the wall in serving, and the serve has to come back beyond a certain line. So, okay.
Yeah.
You have a court.
I'm with you.
You have a wall.
Whoever's played squash or racquetball,
It's the same kind of thing. You know, you have the two boxes. You serve from one side or the other, and then you have to serve to the opposite corner, right?
Yeah.
Whatever. So what I loved about handball is it's ambidextrous, because you would hit the ball. You would be hitting the ball with either hand based on where you were. And I am ambidextrous, so I wasn't great at it, but I loved it, and I was pretty good, you know.
Never heard of the sports.
You've never heard of it because racquetball, you've heard of racquetball,
Yeah.
came in and was so popular, it just kind of eliminated all the handball courts became racquetball courts. People would come and play racquetball. And the old handball games now, you couldn't play that long because it would kill your hands. But racquetball, you can keep going.
But would you catch the ball and then release?
No.
You would smack it.
It was a smack. It was a smack. Yeah. We should, okay, write down a note. Look up on YouTube. I don't know how to classic handball, maybe.
I know, I'll find it.
Olympic handball. I don't know.
I'll find it, yeah. But that was the only sport that you found yourself playing, enjoying.
That I enjoyed on a regular basis. I didn't run.
I've
tried to run a few times. My feet and knees just don't like it. I've tried to, and I didn't do gymnastics. I rode a bicycle for a while, but it was just for transportation, not like to be a cyclist.
Injuries, though? Have you faced any, minor, major, medium injuries?
No. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
No, I haven't. I just have the typical injuries of aging. And actually, because we couldn't keep playing handball, we had to transition to racquetball just like everybody else in those days. Mm-hmm. And I did have an injury. One of my partners, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he smacked me in the eye with the racket. And then I had to go to the hospital for a couple of days because there was blood in my eye, and they didn't know if I had a detached retina.
Yeah.
So I had a couple stitches, and I stayed in a hospital bed with a patch over my eye for a couple of days until my eyeball cleared, and they went, "Oh, you're fine. Yeah, you're fine right now." That's the only sports injury I've had.
So excuse me if this is a bit ignorant, but sports massage versus regular massage therapy. What does a sports massage therapist need to know that a regular massage therapist maybe doesn't know? Where do they differentiate?
Yes.
Where do they differentiate? Me, my calves hurt.
Yes.
Why should I go to a sports massage therapist and not to a regular massage therapist?
Good question. So really, sports massage is more of a marketing term than any particular aspect how it differentiates from regular massage. Generally speaking, I would say that. If you were to go to a regular massage therapist and say, I really sort of wrecked my calves, can you work on my calves? They would work on your calves and you'd probably have good results from it. Sports massage techniques tend to be a little more specific. Regular kind of relaxation massage, and this sort of gets back to the educational process as well. Unless a massage therapist has been in practice for a long time, they've learned kind of maybe a basic routine for working on people. So let's say working on your calf muscles, maybe they'll do some Swedish style effleurage, maybe some petrissage, maybe a little stripping. Very few people do that, the broad cross fiber work that we were talking about in the coursework, which is, I would say, is actually a specialized feature of sports massage from what I know. I learned broad cross fiber work in my training, and other sports massage therapists and educators do some version of that broadening of the muscle across the grain of the muscle, with the idea that this is a way the muscle doesn't normally move, and therefore we can help it function more efficiently because spreading those muscle fibers. And does this really happen? We don't know. It feels like something's happening when we strum across a muscle and it gets supple and it sort of gives under the pressure of the stroke. But we know that, I'm starting to dive into kind of a deep hole here, but we know that all the muscles are enveloped in a layer, in a tube of fascia, if you will, and each muscle fiber is wrapped in fascia, and each muscle, all the fibers together are wrapped in fascia. And so are we actually spreading the fibers apart? I don't know. I don't know that there's been any research to show that, in fact, our hypothesis is correct, but it feels like something good is happening there.
But is that what you're picturing as well when you're
Yes.
working
Yes,
with someone?
when you're working on someone. So as we were talking about in the class, regular sort of Swedish and or relaxation massage, effleurage, petrissage, maybe a little stripping, and those would all be valuable and beneficial for you. Probably no broad cross fiber, probably maybe some pin and stretch style work, because a lot of people sort of figure that out on their own. Certainly before I was taught to do pin and stretch, I was doing it just because it seemed like a good thing, right? So when I think about sports massage and my training in sports massage, it has to do with our approach to the work and who the client is on the table. If I'm working on an athlete, I have to be thinking about a lot of things like where are they in their training cycle? What kind of stresses do they have on their body based on the sport that they do and where they are in their training cycle? What is too much massage based on where they are in their training cycle? If you're an athlete about to compete in an event in a couple of days, I'm not going to do any deep body work on you because you're not going to recover enough to feel like yourself when you come to the event.
Yep.
So a regular massage therapist might not really think about that. So the other thing that I learned in my training, as we talked about in the class, is the Cyriax friction work. That is not taught anymore in massage schools, as far as I know. There could be some that are teaching that as part of their training, but your basic massage training would not include that. So I learned that as part of my sports massage training. And there's still a lot of practitioners who do the Cyriax deep transverse friction work. For me personally, I've seen excellent results doing that, especially with injuries. It's especially useful as a sports massage therapist. If I know you're a runner and you're coming in for regular maintenance massage, I know you're a runner, I'm going to use the friction work as a way to palpate and then sort of examine the tissues that most likely are subject to overuse injuries. So like hamstrings, calves. So we do palpatory exam using friction work for assessment to say, well, how are your hamstring tendons doing? How's that ischial tuberosity attachment? Or how's your Achilles tendon doing? As John Harris used to say, healthy tissue doesn't hurt when you press on it. So if I'm in there thinking about that and the stresses you as an athlete put on your body in your sport, I want to examine those structures and go, well, how does this feel? Does this hurt? If it hurts, what's the pain level on it? If you're training for a marathon and your Achilles tendon is sore like to a 2 or 3 on a scale of 10, that's pretty normal for the level of mileage you're putting in. But if it's 5 or a 6 or a 7, even though you might not have symptoms yet, I know from my experience and from my training that if you keep training at the level you are now, in the next month or 2 months, you're going to come in and say, my Achilles are killing me. So as a sports massage therapist, if you're coming to me for maintenance and recovery work, I'm going to say, hey, we have an issue here. We can treat it now and resolve it way faster and easier than if we wait until you come in complaining. So for me, those are some of the differences between, going to just I hate to say regular massage therapist, but a massage therapist who's not focused on sports,
Yeah.
to somebody who's doing more relaxation work or spa work or maybe some other kind of body work, emotional release work, but not focused on the active athletic client. Does that make sense? I mean, was that too long of a discussion?
Not too long. And no, it does. It does absolutely make sense. I want to ask you about stretching. You know, you've written a couple books. Four books? How many are we talking?
One book 4 times. Yeah. One book 4 editions. Yeah.
But is it all? But I thought there was a stretching book and a sports massage book separately.
Yes, that's true. This facilitated stretching is in its 4th edition now. Came out in 1994. My sports massage book came out in 2019. So 2 separate topics. In the sports massage book, we refer to stretching, but we don't go into detail on it because we have another book.
Yeah. But stretching, in your eyes, your experience, how important is it? And I mean, I'm assuming it's a topic that you're passionate about if you spend so much time writing a book.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And as you know, there's a lot of controversy about stretching. People on both sides of the argument can find research that supports their position. Stretching is good. Stretching
from a completely personal experience.
Yes.
All I can say is the more time I dedicate to stretching, the better I feel.
Okay.
And on the other side, to support that, the less time I spend on stretching, the worse I feel.
The worse you feel. Well, then, in your case, stretching is beneficial. It's helpful for you, no matter what the physiological mechanisms are about stretching. And so a lot of the arguments about stretching are about what's actually happening in stretching. And in the old days, I'm going back to when people used to say, well, you have to stretch because it helps prevent injury, right? There's been, I have to say, quite a bit of research on that topic that seems to indicate that stretching is not preventive in that way. But again, the quality of the studies might not be there. I haven't read all the studies. You know, we can look at these kind of, what do they call them? Meta studies, where they gather a whole bunch of studies about stretching and see if they can parse out some overall overarching theme or result. So most of what I read about stretching and injury prevention is that it doesn't really make any difference. However, for you, maybe it does.
Yeah, so does most research say that it does not make much difference? Most
research would say statistically, the injury rate between people who stretch and people who don't stretch is the same. Therefore, stretching doesn't help prevent injury. But how did they study? Who did they study? What sport are they talking about? I mean, there's all these things that I want to go, well, wait a minute. Let's dig a little deeper into that research or that result.
And also, what counts as an injury?
And what counts as an injury? A lot of athletes don't report injuries, even if they have them, because it's going to interfere with their ability to do their sport. So many elements in all this area where we talk about things like this, you know. So as I usually say to people, clients, students in my classes, there's research on either side of the argument. If you read the research, it all sounds valid. However, in my experience as a therapist, in your experience as a stretcher, it's good for you. It's helpful. In my experience with working with clients of all kinds, not just athletes, stretching during a massage session feels appropriate. It's pleasurable. Stretching shouldn't hurt, I don't think, because if we go back to the nervous system and the brain controlling everything in the body, including muscle tightness, muscle tension, if stretching is painful, the brain is going to if the brain interprets this stretch that I'm doing with you as painful, what's it going to do? Is it going to let you do it? It's going to lock you down, go, no, we got to stop that. We have to protect the tissue. We have to protect the joint, whatever it is that's sending those nociceptive signals to the brain. So, again, my opinion, stretching should always be pleasurable, never be painful. And, in massage therapy, we talk about, well, it hurts, but it feels good at the same time. It's like, man, I'm scratching my arm and I'm killing it. It really hurts to scratch it, but it feels so good to scratch my shoulder. That kind of sensation in massage is usually considered to be great. That's where the therapeutic range of pressure hurts good, hurts a little bit, feels good, don't stop doing that. In stretching, I think even that is a little bit too much input to the brain. And so one of the books, I'm quoting some stretching book, I think it's called Staying Supple. Read it a long time ago, but I think it was that author who said, stretching is a pleasurable experience. It should always be a pleasurable experience, something that you could continue to do. So,
makes sense.
That's my opinion. That's my opinion on the whole stretching.
Stretching again, it's a. I'm compelled to. I'm compelled to stretch. Similar to what I told you over lunch today, where it's a product that's not necessarily, easy to do. It's not a theory that's a quick fix.
Correct.
It's something that you have to dedicate time to.
Yes.
And although even if you do it in a pleasurable way, it takes a lot of time to see and feel progress. And I find that idea compelling because as someone who has stretched in a very disciplinary manner over and over again for long periods of time, and as someone who has taken minor breaks from stretching, and just for myself to kind of feel the differences in my body when stretching continuously and when not stretching.
Yeah.
I do feel better when I do stretch, but I also know that it takes more effort, more energy, mental energy, and I know that it's something that when I do get better at, it feels good, and feeling that my hamstring is more flexible actually suddenly makes my hips feel better and my back feel better and my posture feel better as well. And as a result, my running feels better. And as a result of my running feeling better, I have a better day. And as a result of having a better day, work is better and I'm nicer to my friends and my loved ones. So, I think besides time, I don't see any negatives in stretching. And I've been stretching my entire life. And starting yoga a few months back has only made me appreciate stretching more. Has only made me realize that there's many ways to stretch, not just the conventional technical ways that maybe you can read in a book. You can, for yourself, you can adjust the way you stretch. You can adjust certain stretches. In my brain, if I close my eyes and someone says stretching, the first thing I think about is someone standing and holding their heel to their butt and stretching their quads.
Stretching the quads, right.
The very traditional stretches, which I think most people, that's what they know as stretching.
Yes.
But stretching doesn't have to be that. Stretching can be standing up straight and breathing in and leaning your shoulder to the right and feeling a beautiful stretch across the side of your body while waiting in line in the bank or to get your Jersey Mike sandwich. Whatever it is you're doing. But, so stretching can be many great things and doesn't have to be a time waster. But personally, only good experiences. For you, in terms of writing a book about stretching, a book about, or it's facilitated stretching specifically, right?
Yes.
So where does the facilitated word, where does that come in? And where do the benefits of facilitated stretching versus, again, I'm using the word regular without demeaning it. Regular stretching.
The style of stretching that most people are aware of, like you said.
Yeah. And it's most accessible.
Everybody knows how to pull their heel toward their butt to stretch their quad. Well, actually, not everybody knows that. It's amazing. It's amazing when I teach stretching classes how many people don't have that image in their head. Anyway, so to come back to what you're saying,
Yeah, but that's interesting. So you're saying, like, am I overestimating the knowledge out there in terms of
maybe
what people? Yeah,
maybe. We've become such a sedentary society. Again, talking about the U.S. mostly, but I want to come back to two things that you said. Stretching doesn't have to be like a traditional sort of like, oh, I need to have 30 minutes to stretch out before or after I work out. Like you were saying, you could be standing in line. Maybe you do a little side stretch, and it feels so good, right? It's pleasurable. It makes you want to do it again or do it more, right? So I think we know genetically some people are born with less flexibility than others. So that's a factor in whether stretching feels good to you or not. I've talked to more than a few people who they'll say, even when I was a kid, I could never sit cross-legged. I could never touch my toes. I'm not one of those babies who could put their big toe in their mouth, So those folks, I'm not sure that stretching would have would be the same pleasurable experience that you have. If you're more of a person with normal flexibility or hypermobility, you're going to feel like stretching. You're going to enjoy stretching more than somebody who's super inflexible genetically. So that being said, to come back to the other thing that you said about stretching having to be not a time waster, but taking up a certain amount of time. What's interesting when I talk to clients and we're going through their history, especially if they're athletes, and I say, well, what about, are you doing any stretching? And they almost 98% of people say, oh, I know I should stretch more, but. So everybody sort of has this idea that stretching is good for them. It would be really good if I would do more of it. I would feel better. But what they then say is, I don't have time, and what they really mean is, I don't want to shorten my workout in order to make time to do the stretching work. So there's some education that has to go on there with clients. It's like, well,
prioritization.
Yeah, what's your priority? And if there's somebody who's stretched on and off in the past and not seen many results, they're really not motivated to stretch. So we have these long circular conversations, but it's good. Coming back to my book, Facilitated Stretching, this is a style of work that I learned in my sports massage training. And again, this is not really taught in normal massage programs. I never learned about it in my massage training. It was only as part of a program more focused on athletes. So we call the book Facilitated Stretching just because that's the title that my publisher came up with. It's based on proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, or for short PNF, which is a physiotherapy modality that was developed in the late 40s, 1950s, and was designed to rehabilitate physical therapy patients in a more sort of holistic, synergistic way. And the founders noticed that there were certain patterns of motion in the body, and they were able to try to make use of already reflex loops that were already available in the body that helped muscles to contract or relax or lengthen or not lengthen. And so the basic premise in PNF is that an isometric contraction of a muscle is then followed by a neurological inhibition of that muscle that allows it to move, lengthen more easily, more efficiently. So if you're a person who's been doing passive stretching, regular stretching, if you will, in your lifetime and haven't had a lot of success, or maybe you have had a lot of success, but you feel like you've reached the end of what you can accomplish on your own, then facilitated stretching is just like maybe the next level of stretching for you because we're trying to do more to balance the muscles on either side of the joint to allow you to stretch a little more fully. So let's say you're pretty good at stretching your hamstrings. How do you stretch your hamstrings? What is there a certain position that you favor for stretching?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking you now, yes. I'm turning tables on you, Danny.
My favorite way is the simple stand up straight, breathe in and fold forward, because that's the easiest one for me. The harder one for me is almost like a half split position where you're like kneeling on one leg,
on one leg,
straightening the other leg
out in front of you,
and then leaning forward. That one's a bit more difficult for me. And playing with those angles to try and get the the three muscles of the hamstrings activated there is a challenge for me. Again, the more I do it, the better I get at it, the better I feel. But if I neglect it and stick to what's easy for me, then when I do get back to it and attempt it, it's not as enjoyable.
And did you learn that half kneeling stretch when you were playing soccer?
Correct.
Or football, if you're not outside the U.S., he played football.
Correct.
He was a pro, by the way. Did he tell you that? Anyway, so you have a favorite one that's easy for you, and you have a different positioning that's harder, more challenging for you. If I was to say to you, you can only do the harder one from now on, would you be motivated to keep doing that? Or would you go, that's not so pleasurable. That second position is not really so pleasurable, is it?
I know, but
so I'm not challenging
I'm not okay in the head, so if you told me something like that, I would probably enjoy the challenge.
I'm not challenging you to do the harder one. Stretching should be pleasurable. Yeah. I need to take a bathroom break. We were talking about the two hamstring stretches that you do.
Correct.
One, pleasurable, comfortable, love to do it. The other one, not so great.
Rather avoid it. Yep.
Rather avoid it. Don't feel like you get a good stretch in that position. Would that be fair to say, or no?
No, I think I feel like I'm getting way more with minor effort. Just by being in the right position and slightly bending,
yes.
I feel like, woo, my hamstrings are working here. They're extending. Whereas the comfortable, easier hamstring stretch feels like I can keep going and going and going. And I have to keep going in order to feel that sensation of my hamstrings extending and working.
In the first position that you enjoy more than the second position?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just sort of to reiterate, if the first position is easy and pleasurable for you, then you're going to be more motivated to do that one. And there's nothing wrong with it being a pleasurable experience. It should feel good. It shouldn't hurt. And even if you're saying to yourself, oh my God, I could really feel that stretching, in some cases that might be too much sensation. The second position where you're kneeling on a knee and you have let's say your right leg outstretched, heel on the ground, a slight bend forward, already you feel the stretch in your hamstrings because in that position you're already somewhat stretched out, so it doesn't take much to feel that stretching sensation. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think I'm correct in saying that in that position, it's hard for your body to allow the hamstring to relax and lengthen more because it's also at the same time supporting you.
And stabilizing the body.
Stabilizing you. So it's sort of like a push-pull thing. Should the brain goes, well, what's more important, stabilizing or stretching? And my theory would be that the brain's going, I'm protecting you by stabilizing you better. If we don't keep you stabilized, you might hyperextend your knee, or you might fall over, or maybe you'll injure the support leg somehow by letting the other side go.
I never thought about that way.
So I think about it in terms of a classic hamstring stretch where somebody will put their foot up on a chair or on a curb or a bar.
Which is the same thing.
It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
The leg is up there, but it's also supporting you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if the leg was removed, you'd be on one leg, and what would happen? You'd fall over.
Yeah.
Right. So again, in my opinion, I think it's better to stretch tissues out that are not in gravity. But that belies the fact that you can be standing and do a fold over, bend over stretch as if you were going to touch your toes. Your legs are still supporting you, but so the muscles are still active in some way, but there's something different about than having one leg out and the other leg not.
But also in a standing stretch, thinking about it, my quads are contracting and almost stabilizing.
They are.
My body, so I can allow my hamstrings to almost relax while I fold forward.
And your quads, when your quads contract, they neurologically inhibit your hamstrings to allow you to do what you're doing. So that's maybe another piece of it. So,
how was the experience publishing a book?
Oh my gosh, that's hard.
Books.
That is hard. I had no idea what I was getting into. I look at these authors who publish a book every year or whatever. I made mention of Dr. Leon Chatow. He was a British osteopath. He died a few years ago. He was a great guy, prolific author on many topics. I believe he published 60 books, if I remember correctly, some enormous amount. For me, when Human Kinetics said to me, we have other people who have more experience and knowledge about PNF stretching than you do, but they can't write about it very well. We like your style of writing. I was like, well, that's kind of cool. You know, I always thought I wanted to be a writer, but
have you always written?
No, I haven't always written. You know, I wrote a little poetry, as all teenage boys do, college boys do. Wrote some poetry.
I think that's a rare thing for teenage boys.
Oh, okay. Well,
maybe nowadays. I don't remember myself or any of my friends writing poetry, but I find that pretty impressive.
Right. You never tried to impress a girl by writing her a little poem?
You know, maybe, but I don't think I would classify that as poetry or what came out on my pencil.
Better than a limerick, hopefully. Anyway, so I was like, oh, well, okay, if you think I'm a pretty good writer, you know, I can learn more about PNF stretching, right? Which is what I did. I agreed to write the book. They gave me a deadline, which I don't remember exactly how long it was. I know I had to extend it at least once because John Harris and I had proposed the sports massage book when Human Kinetics
John Harris
was
your
my mentor in the sports massage
you
training.
Went to school, 50 hours.
To school. He introduced me to teaching in his school at that point. I worked in a massage center that he had found that it was a massage co-op. So he was just a great guy. I really liked him a lot. First, he was my teacher. Then he was my mentor and friend. He was moving to Australia with his wife at that time, who was an Aussie. And, you know, this was, again, before internet. And he was like, hey, you know what? Congratulations on the deal from Human Kinetics. I'm going to be in Australia. I'm really not that interested in doing a book just on that. You just go ahead and do it. So with his blessing, I started doing the research. I read a ton of stuff. In those days, I had more energy. I was, 30 years younger than I am now. And I could do massage during the day, go home and have some dinner, and, go write at night. And My wife was not all that happy about it. She was pleased that I had a book contract. But the actual production of the book was very stressful for her and for me and for us together. So it took me a year and a half to write the book, and then lots of editorial changes in the process, approving photographs, going to the first book we did all the photo shoot. We hired a photographer in Colorado Springs. We did the photo shoot. A lot of elements, a lot of components I never had thought about. And I was very happy with the first edition, but as I looked at it over the years, I could see there were a lot of mistakes that we made. I wasn't as good of a writer as I thought I was. Hopefully in the 4 editions, in the 3 subsequent editions, I've become a better writer. I know more about the topic because I've been teaching it so much.
How long on average does it take to write a new edition of a book?
A year and a half.
I'm almost like writing a new book.
I'm a very slow writer. It's like writing a new book. And human kinetics, their sort of parameters for a new edition is there's got to be a certain amount of new material. It just can't be rehashing the same. So every time it was time for a new edition, and they would come to me and say, it's been about 5 years and sales are dropping off a little bit. Do you want to, let's do a second edition or third edition.
Or fourth now. Which I think is the final one. We had to come up with a different slant on the work, a different way to talk about the basic facilitated stretching work, but bring in material that we hadn't introduced before. So that was a challenge because sometimes I'd have to go learn some more stuff. And in my first edition, I had a co-author who was a physical therapist, which is very helpful. So in the second edition, we added some more sort of physiotherapy styles of treatment work. Well, that's when I think it was the second edition we started adding some treatment work or some sequences of a whole, here's stretching sequence for runners, here's a stretching sequence for cyclists, which we've maintained in the other editions. So it is like I said earlier, I've written one book 4 times, and every one is different. There's more research, and the last edition there's like tons of research that shows that stretching isn't really that valuable. So I'm thinking to myself, why am I writing another book? But in my practice, in my experience, in watching other people learn how to do facilitated stretching, I mean, I see the benefit. And the fabulous thing about facilitated stretching work is you sometimes see instantaneous changes in range of motion, which motivates the client who maybe has been a stretcher and tried to stretch, never found any results from it. They see the results like during a session, you go, oh my gosh, I just gained 10 degrees of range of motion just like in 3 minutes, which motivates them to do what you've been talking about, the long-term practices where the benefit comes. Stretching once in a while, you don't really know. What did John Harris mean to you in life?
Well, I just am so thankful to have met him. I liked him as a person. He was eccentric. Not everybody liked John Harris. But those students people who studied with him long enough really came to love him a lot. And, when I moved to Colorado and he moved to Australia, we kind of lost touch for a while, and then things changed. He moved back to California, and we were in touch a little bit. And a few years before he passed away, he finally published a book that contained a lot of the material that we wanted to have in our sports massage book. I was so pleased for him. He did a great job with it. And then, unfortunately, he passed away from, I believe he had Parkinson's. And I didn't know he had passed away till a year after he was gone. Anyway, he really launched my career path. So I love the work that I do, and I love him for being that guy, Getting a little teary when I talk about him. So I miss him a lot too. So anyway, that's what he meant to me.
please tell people where they can find your material, your books, your online content. You have live classes that you teach as well. Obviously, your classes will be, the online courses will be live on Neil Asher Education sometimes in the next couple months. So please keep an eye out. But please tell people where they can find you.
Well, if you Google my name, Bob McAtee,
AKA the Stretch Man.
Also known as the Stretch Man. If I'm doing my internet SEO stuff, well, my name will pop up in the first page of the Google search. My website is called stretchman.com because when we developed a website, all I had was the stretching book. So, in hindsight, it should have been bobmcatee.com. But anyway, my email address is stretchman@stretchman.com. Please don't spam me. I'm happy to hear from any listener or anyone who's interested in learning more about what I do. On my website, there we have a lot of different categories. We haven't even talked about the massage tool that I invented, but I have my website, the first page is sort of like a newspaper page, and then you can click on my practice, my teaching, my publishing, the massage tool that I invented, and in amongst that mix, there's a workshop page that lists all my live classes. During COVID, I never wasn't traveling. Nobody was traveling. I finally, now that the pandemic has settled down to a tolerable level, I guess, I have a few live classes scheduled in the U.S. In the past, I've taught in the UK, I've taught in New Zealand, I've taught in Singapore. I would love to get back to doing some international travel, but that's maybe, I don't know if I'm going to be doing that again or not. I need to be invited, number one. And some of those trips, it was great to do it, but, it was financially a terrible decision, but it was fun anyway, and it was great.
Well,
it was great to meet international.
As we did most of this podcast, circling back.
Yeah.
We wanted to be a French translator so that you could travel, right?
Yes, so that I could travel.
So you ended up traveling anyway.
Right, yes. And you know what? Just as an aside, none of my books have been published in French yet, and I keep asking my publisher, how come we don't have, we have Italian, we have Spanish, we have Portuguese, we have Chinese and Korean. Why don't we have French yet? And
how is your French?
My French is I could, anyway, not good at all. Let's just say that.
So good to have you here. So good to finally meet you in person. And hopefully we have a chance to sit down, drink beers again, and have a good time.
I look forward to it. It was just a pleasure to hang out with you the last few days. We spent a lot of time chatting online, video chats, but nothing like seeing you in person and having you here to guide me through this whole online education process. Fascinating for me, challenging for me, and you have made the results so much better than it would have been had you not been here to guide me through the process. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
If you liked this video and you want to see more, make sure to subscribe below and don't forget to hit the notification button.